Grandfather forced us to fight every Saturday since I was 10. Now my parents want me to come home and pretend it was just boys being boys. A year later, my cousin informed me that the younger boys were also starting to resist. In my family, all the males had to follow the same rule: make your cousin bleed or go hungry for a week. Every Saturday, my male cousins aged 10 to 18 would gather in my grandfather's garage. 2 boys joined the chalk circle. Only the person who caused his opponent to bleed got to eat dinner for the next week. They termed it building brotherhood through suffering. My granddad began this practice after returning from Vietnam. "I watched soft American boys die crying for their mothers," he'd say, his glassy eyes scanning our features. "No grandson of mine will be weak." My uncles proudly enforced the restrictions. Uncle Marco had a photo album of his fight victories and pages of his cousins' bloodied faces from the 1980s. So when I turned 10, I spent my birthday standing in the fight garage for the first time, surrounded by cousins who were nursing previous injuries. I tried to convince myself that it wouldn't be so horrible, that I could just zone out and pretend it didn't happen. Boy, was I mistaken. It turns out that you didn't only draw blood, you fought until blood reached the concrete floor. No medical assistance until the winner had eaten their dinner. Winners dined like kings, while losers sat at the same table watching. Brothers fought each other. Fathers made bets. "First fights are always special," Uncle Tony said, pushing me into the circle. "My opponent, my cousin Calvin, who is also 10, is afraid." The men built a wall around us yelling, "Blood brings brotherhood," repeatedly. Calvin and I circled each other, neither wanting to throw the initial punch. "Hit him," my father exclaimed. So I did. I beat him till his nose cracked and blood covered the floor. That night, I ate chicken and rice while Calvin sat across from me, an empty plate and a towel pushed against his face. The months that followed broke something in each of us. My 12-year-old brother Anthony nearly lost his left eye while battling our cousin David. Darius, formerly the loveliest child, learned to combat nasty fish by snagging eyes and biting pieces from ears. "Gotta eat," he'd reply later, spitting blood. By my 15th bout, I had only won 7 times. Not enough to prevent the hollow sensation of hunger, but enough to experience the horrible joy of seeing others go hungry. I despised who I was becoming. Our neighborhood was so small that more than half of the teachers at my school had some connection to us, so they made sure no questions were asked. I knew if I didn't find a solution quickly, my life would be finished, but I wanted the problem to go away on its own, and it eventually did. We were preparing for the spring performance when the drama teacher showed us theatrical blood packets, which are tiny pouches that rupture on impact, producing realistic blood effects. That was my light bulb moment. I saved a few every day to test out my theory. So by Saturday, I had palmed a packet before entering the chalk circle. When my cousin Marco seized me in a headlock, I slapped the package against my nose, causing fake blood to flow down my face. "Blood on the floor," Uncle Tony exclaimed. "Marco won." I went hungry, and for the first time, I was not upset about it. Instead, I concentrated on stealing additional packets. I demonstrated the technique to my younger relatives during potty breaks. We created a system of synchronized actions that appeared harsh but caused little damage. A fake stumble here and a package there. For 3 glorious months, we outwitted our fathers. We swapped winners based on who needed food the most. My younger brother was smiling again. We were actors, not gladiators. Everything was going well until my grandfather turned to see my cousin's unmarked face after a terrible battle. "Where are the bruises?" he inquired. "How did they heal so fast?" The room fell still, and I feigned to find the peas on my plate. Extremely fascinating. We assumed he would forget about it, but he didn't. The following Saturday, everything changed. Strip searches, metal detectors, and uncles serving as referees inside the circle. When they discovered the blood sachets taped inside Domingo's waistline, my grandfather set an example for him. 3 18-year-olds against 1 14-year-old. Real blood and real screams. Domingo struggled to walk properly for several weeks. "You're next," my father assured me that night. "Fight like a man, or I'll show you what real brotherhood means." I didn't say anything before pulling out my phone. I've been recording these fights for 8 months. Every beating, every forced starvation, it's all uploaded to a cloud drive that CPS and the police already have access to. Every word I said was false, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that they put an end to the bloodshed permanently. "We're done bleeding for you," Calvin said. Jasper was already on a call. "Police, we need help at 1847 Oakwood Drive. Child abuse in progress." The garage exploded into chaos. Grandfather's hands trembled as he reached for Jasper's phone, but my cousin pulled it away and backed toward the door. The distant sound of sirens made everyone freeze. "You're bluffing, boy," Grandfather remarked, his glass eye locked on me and his good eye darting between the windows. His hands shook as he signaled for everyone to remain calm, but I could see anxiety creeping into his weathered features. Father came at me, but Calvin and Jasper jumped between us. Calvin still had dried blood under his fingernails from our pretend fight earlier. "This ends tonight, Uncle," he continued, his voice unwavering despite everything. I forced myself to keep the lie even as my voice trembled. "Check your phones at midnight. Everything goes live." 8 months of evidence. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I held my chin up and met Grandfather's gaze. A faint gasp emanated from the corner. Anthony had seen our 8-year-old cousin, Miguel, hiding behind the tool cabinet, holding his father's phone and recording everything. The red light flashed like an accusation. Uncle Marco took the phone from Miguel's little hands, his thick fingers fumbling with the screen while deleting the video. But Miguel said something that caused Marco's cheeks turn pale. "I already sent it to Mom." The sirens became louder, then abruptly veered away into another street. Jasper's hurried call had provided the incorrect address. The room exhaled together, but their relief was too obvious, too guilty. "Family meeting now. Inside the house," Grandfather said, his authority reasserting itself. He pointed to Darius. "Check the streets. Make sure they're really gone. Nobody leaves until we settle this." We entered the main house like prisoners. The moms emerged from the kitchen. Their confusion turned to fear as they saw the blood on their sons' clothes. They'd heard about the battles and pretended not to notice, but the starving aspect was new to some of them. My mother's expression contorted as she saw my wounded cheek fully for the first time under the bright kitchen lights. "I thought it was just roughhousing," she replied, but her voice trembled as she revealed the lie she had been telling herself for years. Grandfather stood at the head of the supper table, where winners ate and losers starved. "Anyone who walks out that door tonight is dead to this family. No money, no help, nothing." 3 women had already gathered their children. Coats are half on, and car keys jingle. My Aunt Catherine clutched her twin boys close, both with new bruises from tonight's interrupted battle. Uncle Tony moved to block the front entrance, filling the frame. "Nobody's going anywhere until we know what evidence actually exists. This could ruin all of us." During the stalemate, Calvin got my attention and showed me his phone screen. He had been recording sounds for the past hour. The battery indicator displayed 2%. My stomach sank. Our only genuine evidence was that he died in his hands. Then the lights went out. Darius had reached the breaker box. In the sudden darkness, furniture shattered and adults yelled. Someone's elbow hit me in the ribs as bodies crashed amid the chaos. "The bathroom window," Jasper growled into my ear. 5 of us scrambled through the little window while our fathers cursed and staggered in the darkness. We struck the ground running, splitting up without a conversation. The younger boys went to my friend Jake's house 3 blocks away. Jasper, Calvin, and I dashed toward the 24-hour McDonald's on Main Street. Lou's house was closer, so we tried it first. His mother answered the door in her robe, her face pinched with concern. Behind her, I could see Lou's father's silhouette in the corridor. "Your grandfather has already called," she added, not meeting our gaze. "Get away from here. Now." The door slammed shut in our faces. My phone constantly buzzed. Threats from uncles inundated the texts, as did pleas from mothers wondering if we were safe and demands from fathers for our location. Each message made my hands shake more. When the manager approached our McDonald's booth, we hadn't even finished ordering. "Your grandfather called, said you boys are runaways. I need to call the police." The security camera's red light blinks above us, just like Miguel's phone did. We abandoned our untouched lunch and raced away. Desperate, I contacted Miss Rodriguez, my drama teacher. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice heavy with sleep. When I explained, she agreed to meet us at school. Something about her tone felt odd, but I was too desperate to examine it. She was waiting in the parking lot when we arrived, but she wasn't the only one. Principal Morrison stood beside her with arms crossed. "Your family is worried sick," Miss Rodriguez continued without looking at me. She had called them first. Of course she did. Half of the school staff was linked to us in some way. We rushed through the gymnasium, but Anthony hurt his ankle when jumping the chain-link fence. His agonizing howl boomed across the empty basketball court. We had to move very slowly now, with him between us. Dawn arrived with nowhere safe to go. My bank card was refused at 3 separate ATMs. Grandfather had already made the call to close ranks overnight. Calvin's phone eventually died, taking our loan recording with it. A TV in a shop window showed the local morning news. Police are searching for several runaway teens from a concerned immigrant family, according to the reporter. I recognize her. She was the daughter of the hairdresser who looked after my grandmother. "Maybe if we apologize," Jasper said, swaying on his feet from tiredness. Domingo's younger brother, Sean, had joined us during the night. He pulled up his shirt, revealing fresh bruises on his ribcage. "This is what happened after you left. Dad gave me a lesson about family loyalty. I've made a decision. I'll go to the police alone. You guys find somewhere to hide." The police station smelled like burnt coffee and sadness. I had hardly begun to speak when I noticed Uncle Marco through the glass barrier, making a missing person report at the next desk. The officer behind the glass looked between Uncle Marco and me, her emotions ranging from boredom to confusion. She motioned for me to wait with a finger before buzzing me into a small interview room that smelled of old cigarettes and cleaning solution. Detective Lynn arrived 20 minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a notepad. He placed 1 cup in front of me and slipped into the metal chair across the table. His wedding ring clinked against the table when he opened his notebook. "Your uncle says you've been having some issues at home," he said, his voice bland. "Want to tell me your side?" I curled my hands around the warm cup, gaining courage. The words fell out of the garage, along with the fighting, blood, and hunger. Detective Lynn's pen moved across the page, but his demeanor became more dubious as I spoke. When I finished, he put his pen down and leaned back. "So, you're telling me your grandfather makes you boys box? Like a boxing club?" "Not boxing," I clarified, frustrated. "Fighting until someone bleeds. Kids go hungry if they lose." He stroked his temple and summoned his companion, Officer Petroyan, whose nameplate caught the fluorescent light. When Petroyan heard my narrative, his expression hardened into something I know all too well. "Listen, kid," Petroyan instructed, crossing his arms. "These old country families have different ways. My own grandfather used to make us wrestle. It's not an abuse, it's tradition. You can't just call it abuse because you don't like it." My protests went unheeded. Within an hour, they released me to Uncle Marco's care. Granddad chaired the local VFW and had loaned half the town money, so favors were simple. Uncle Marco's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as he promised grandfather's leniency if I simply recanted. We passed Louisa's house. His family's car was gone, and the driveway was empty. Back home, grandfather had changed into a concerned patriarch. He sat on his leather chair, surrounded by my aunts and uncles, and played the anxious elder to perfection. "Boys fight," he said to the room, shaking his head sadly. "It's natural. This one has imagination problems. Too much time with those theater people." The next morning, a tired-looking social worker named Ms. Patel appeared and interrogated me in front of my entire family. Grandfather sat alongside me, his hand hard on my shoulder, and my parents flanked me on the other side. Every question she asked was filtered by the weight of their presence. "Has anyone ever hurt you?" she said, pen poised over her clipboard. Grandfather's fingers tightened gradually around my shoulder. My mother's foot tapped against mine beneath the table. Once, twice, a warning. "No," I heard myself saying. "Just normal family stuff." Ms. Patel left promising to follow up, but we all knew she wouldn't. Budget was cut. The CPS closed 200 files that month. Ours was another statistic. The system was swamped, and we appeared to be a close-knit family dealing with a rebellious adolescent. That night, I laid up and planned. Uncle Marco's trophy collection photo book could still be found someplace. While the rest of the family slept, I crept into grandfather's study and removed his car keys from the hook near the door. My hands shook like his in the garage, shivering under the weight of what I was about to accomplish. His study smelled of pipe smoke and worn leather. I searched slowly, going through drawers, shelves, and the closet. I finally located it, beneath a row of accounting ledgers. The album's leather cover had worn smooth from handling. I quickly opened it, intending to picture the proof with an old digital camera I had discovered. However, the pages contained simply typical family images, birthday celebrations, graduations, and holiday feasts. Every terrible image was meticulously changed as if decades of atrocity had never occurred. "Looking for something?" My mother stood in the doorway, her robe tightly wrapped around her small figure. In the moonlight, I could see how much weight she'd dropped recently, her cheekbones sharp beneath the papery skin. "Mom, I need those photos, the real ones." She closed the door behind her and sat on the ottoman beside me. "I know about hunger," she remarked quietly. "I've known all along. But what choice do I have? Leave with nothing. Your father lost his job 3 months ago. Your grandfather pays our mortgage, your sister's school tuition, everything." The weight of her words hung over me like a shroud. "So we just keep bleeding." "You play along until you're 18, she continued, avoiding my gaze. "Then you leave. That's what survivors do." Saturday approached with the certainty of a funeral. Grandfather announced a special exhibition match for my return, telling the family that I would receive a decent education. The other fugitive cousins had trickled back home during the week, each with a similar story of no money, no else to go, and parents who prioritize security over their children's well-being. Jasper reappeared with his arm in a sling, claiming to have been in a skating accident. Calvin returned silently, his recording equipment inexplicably gone. Even courageous little Sean was back, moving cautiously to avoid injuring his ribs. Friday night, grandfather came to my room. He sat in my desk chair, looking older than I had ever seen him, but no less menacing. "Your father tried this at your age," he said casually. "Thought he could change things. Now look, he needs me for everything." Through my doorway, I could see my father hovering in the hall, his shoulders drooping in defeat. "I'm offering you a deal," grandfather said. "Fight once more, properly. Show the family you understand your place. Then you can quit. I'll even pay for college. But this rebellion ends tomorrow." His face clouded. "Then watch what happens to Jasper tomorrow, and it will be your fault." Saturday dawned with storm clouds forming overhead. They kept me in my room as they were preparing for the fight. But I could hear everything through the floor, the scrape of feet on concrete, the voices of adults putting wagers, and the nervous laughter of lads attempting to appear brave. Then Jasper's scream became distinct from the regular sounds of combat. These were absolute misery. I hurled myself against the door and rammed my shoulder into it until the handle snapped. Racing downstairs, I discovered blood pooling behind the garage door. There was commotion within. Jasper lay unconscious on the concrete, bleeding from a head wound. The adults stood motionless, visibly shocked. Grandfather had taken the fight too far, using Jasper to prove his point. My mother eventually snapped. She yelled, "Enough!" and pushed past Uncle Tony. "Call 911, now! This ends tonight." The room split instantly. Some women ran to Jasper's side, while others attempted to hush my mother. Aunt Catherine was already dialing, tears running down her cheeks. The ambulance arrived in minutes, and paramedics loaded Jasper onto a gurney. Grandfather informed them about a skateboarding mishap in a steady, believable tone. But the EMT, a young lady with sharp eyes, saw discrepancies in the injury pattern. She took notes on her iPad and exchanged glances with her buddy. 40 minutes later, after the sirens and the hectic ride to the hospital, I cornered Patricia and told her everything. She listened intently, recording every word, but her look turned compassionate rather than hopeful. "Without the victim's cooperation, it's just hearsay," she stated gently. When Jasper awoke, his parents were around, and he validated my grandfather's story. He stared directly at the doctor and explained that he had fallen while skating. Yet he squeezed my hand while no one was looking. He held an apology in his grip. Patricia showed me something that made my blood turn cold. The hospital's computer system had records of cousin after relative coming in throughout the years. Broken noses, bruised ribs, and concussions, each explained separately. They did, however, paint a definite pattern together. "I see what this is," Patricia stated calmly. "But I need a family member over 18 to make an official report. Someone standing." In the hospital waiting room, my mother hesitated. "Maybe now," she said. But my father interrupted her with a glance, reminding her of our sisters' futures and their reliance on grandfather's money. When I returned home, I saw my possessions stacked on the front lawn. Grandfather stood at the doorway with arms crossed. "You're no longer welcome in this house," he stated. "But legally, I can't kick out a minor. You'll sleep in the garage." The garage still smelled of blood and terror. The chalk circles survived, albeit darker in places. I built a bed in the corner out of old moving blankets, trying not to think of the brutality that had occurred within these walls. While cleaning, I discovered a tooth trapped between two floorboards. On Monday morning, the school counselor called me in. Mrs. Holloway sat behind her desk, hands folded, anxiety on her face. "Your grandfather called. He's worried about your mental health. These accusations you've been making." Mandatory therapy sessions began that week. Dr. Adler's office was expensively decorated in leather and dark wood. He listened to my account with professional interest, taking notes that I knew would portray me as deluded. "Your grandfather is paying for these sessions," he explained during our third encounter. "He wants what's best for you. Sometimes trauma can make us misremember events and create false narratives." I realized what was going on. Everything I said was recorded as evidence of my instability. Grandfather was putting together a case that I was mentally sick, assuring that no one would believe me. The following Saturday, I attempted to videotape the fights from my hiding location in the garage rafters. Darius spotted me crushing my phone under his boot as the other cousins were watching. None of them helped. They'd learned the consequences of defiance. Without a phone, I began penning everything in a journal, noting dates, injuries, and participants. I hid it in my locker at school, believing it was safe. However, the janitor discovered it during routine cleaning and, per process, turned it in to the principal. Principal Morrison convened a family conference to discuss the disturbing fantasies in my journal. Grandfather sat in the room, shaking his head sadly as the principal voiced concern about my violent fantasies and fake recollections. Even Jake's parents were concerned when grandfather sent them Dr. Adler's early assessment. "Maybe you do need help," Jake's mother kindly offered when I attempted to remain at their home. These delusions seemed serious. Desperate, I turned to the local newspaper. Mr. Garrison, the editor, listened patiently as I explained my story. He took notes and asked questions, but I could sense suspicion in his eyes. "This is a serious accusation," he stated ultimately. "We'd need proof, corroboration. Without that, it's just hearsay. And frankly, accusing a respected community elder of something this heinous." When I returned home, I discovered that grandfather had been busy. The few remaining fight trophies were gone, leaving barren shelves and walls. The family was deleting its violent history in real time, eradicating all traces of evidence. Calvin discovered me that night sitting alone in the garage. He looked fatigued and discouraged. "I never had recordings," he said. "I lied to support your bluff. I thought it would work. Thought they'd stop. I'm sorry." The truth about our situation became clear. Then grandfather's goal wasn't merely to fight. It was all about control and dominance until the sons turned 18 and left voluntarily, too broken to question the family authority again. I had to live for another 2 years. I began documenting everything in secret places, using library computers to create accounts and keeping notes in a locker at the bus station. Every piece of evidence was carefully buried away from the family's reach. To keep my cover and escape more severe penalties, I was forced to attend fights as an observer. I sat on an overturned pail in the corner, taking mental notes as cousins bloodied one another. The younger guys had begun to avoid me, with grandfather's indoctrination taking root in fresh brains. One minor win occurred when I got two mothers to schedule their sons' activities around fight evenings. Piano lessons and soccer practice became shields. However, grandfather detected the trend within a few weeks and began organizing fights at random on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings, whenever it suited him. My father eventually spoke to me privately one evening, finding me alone in the garage. He appeared much older than his years, worn down by decades of subjection. "I'm saving money," he said quietly, looking uncomfortably at the door. "When you turn 18, I'll help you leave. Just survive until then." But survival entailed witnessing 10-year-olds join the circle. It meant seeing boys I'd attempted to safeguard become violent. Some relatives practiced combat freely, having been completely indoctrinated into the system. My carefully kept documents was discovered while my aunt was cleaning the library as a volunteer. She ruined everything to defend her family. She subsequently informed me that her own son was reaching fight age, and she didn't want the practice to end. As young males reached the age of 10, alliances moved continuously. Some embraced the ritual, seeing it as a way to gain grandfather's approval. Others sought me in secret, begging for assistance that I could not provide. Darius surprised everyone by defeating our generation's toughest fighter. He grabbed me aside one night, exhaustion written all over his damaged face. "I'm tired of hurting cousins," he confessed, "but I'm in too deep to quit now." We worked together to establish a fresh evidence cache, documenting everything with Darius's insider knowledge. We concealed it in an abandoned structure near the train lines, where I would occasionally sleep to escape the garage's terrible atmosphere. 3 women started family dinners on fight nights, giving their sons a reason to miss. Grandfather replied by relocating fights to Sunday mornings, changing his ritual to keep control. The younger cousins' metamorphosis stung the most. Boys who had previously played together were now practicing fighting movements voluntarily, believing grandfather's rhetoric about power and fraternity. Many of them had been completely indoctrinated. Then came the breakthrough. Miguel, the 8-year-old who had shot the first night, had continued to record discreetly. He showed me a clear video of grandfather beating Domingo during a display of blood spattering while teaching the bigger lads the appropriate technique. However, the footage showed me in the frame, watching without intervening. My complicity was clear, even if forced. My mother discovered my evidence cache while following me one evening. She confronted me in the abandoned structure, tears flowing down her emaciated cheeks. "You'll destroy us all for your principles," she insisted. "I've been skipping meals to save money. Your sisters need their education, and you want to burn it all down." I made a decision: survival over justice. I would wait till the age of 18 before acting, gathering evidence for the future rather than the present. The following fight night, grandfather compelled me to referee a contest between 2 10-year-old boys who had never fought before. I stood in the circle, counting blood drips on the concrete, completely involved in the system I had attempted to destroy. Grandfather beamed from his chair, knowing he had won the round. Jasper had recovered but altered. He suffered from periodic headaches as a result of the head injury. But something else had changed too. He grabbed me away one night and whispered urgently, "I'm recording everything now. Really recording. For when we're older. When we can actually do something." A network of quiet relatives emerged, secretly chronicling and planning for a future reckoning. The resistance has gone underground. More cautious, but not defeated. As my 18th birthday came, grandfather delivered an announcement that chilled my veins. "Our prodigal son will have one final lesson," he stated over dinner. "On his birthday, he fights. Then he can leave with my blessing, or stay with my respect." The ramifications were clear. One last humiliation, one final break, and I'd be free to leave if I could still walk. The cousins murmured about my opponent. Some believed Darius, despite our new union. Others believed grandfather would bring in someone from another branch of the family, someone who did not share our background. But I knew better. I'd witnessed how grandfather operated, how he turned loyalty into weapons. It would be Calvin. My first opponent would be my last, completing the circle with lyrical brutality. And Calvin, now completely indoctrinated, would struggle to actually harm me. The boy who had once stood by me against our fathers was now grandfather's ideal soldier. The evidence we'd acquired was stashed in various locations across town: digital files on library computers, tangible documents in bus station lockers, and movies on ancient phones concealed in abandoned structures, a dispersed archive of violence waiting for the appropriate moment. But as I sat in the garage listening to the newest battle through the walls, that moment seemed inconceivably distant. The moist sound of collision. Men cheered as they remembered their own harsh adolescence. The silence of mothers who prioritize security over their son's safety. I have 2 more months till my birthday. 2 more months of watching, recording, and surviving. 2 more months of complicity in the very system I had attempted to eliminate. The chalk circle waited patiently and hungry, waiting for one final feeding. Sunday morning came with grandfather's new schedule. I observed from the garage doorway as mothers rushed their sons by, citing pressing church engagements. 3 families were able to dodge the morning conflict, but grandfather's gaze followed each absence with icy calculation. Darius then cornered me behind the tool shed. His knuckles had split from demonstrating holds on the younger boys. "Your birthday's in 6 weeks, he remarked, looking over his shoulder. "Calvin has been training extra. Grandfather's been coaching him personally." The following week, grandfather conducted unannounced inspections. He would show up at piano lessons, soccer sessions, and even school activities to ensure his grandkids weren't making up reasons. Mrs. Lynn's piano recital was canceled when grandfather arrived up and demanded her students return for family obligations. I spent several nights in the abandoned structure, adding to our evidence cache. Darius submitted images of medical documents he had taken from his mother's filing cabinet, spanning years of emergency department trips and meticulously documented. We covered everything in plastic and hid it under decaying floorboards. 2 cousins approached me separately that week. 12-year-old Tobias, who was about to make his combat debut, requested for the blood packet trick. I had to explain why it wasn't working anymore. Watching hope leave his face. Emil, 8, just wanted to know if the hunger would soon stop hurting. I lied and replied yes. At the following fight, grandfather introduced a new rule. Winners would henceforth dine in front of their entire extended family, rather than simply their opponents. He wanted the moms to witness their famished boys and realize the consequences of defiance. My Aunt Maria lasted 5 minutes before breaking down and shoving her own dish at her defeated son. Grandfather barred her from the next 3 dinners. Jasper's headaches increased during a particularly violent altercation between 2 14-year-olds. He collapsed in the garage and clutched his skull. The family doctor, grandfather's golf pal, prescribed pain medicine and advised less stress. Nobody revealed the apparent explanation. I learned grandfather had been visiting my school counselor on a weekly basis, delivering updates on my mental health. Mrs. Holloway now looked at me with sympathy rather than alarm, thinking I was insane. My teachers obtained copies of Dr. Adler's findings, which depicted me as a troubled youngster with violent fantasies. Darius's breaking point was 3 weeks before my birthday. Forced to fight his younger brother, he refused to deliver the fatal blow that would draw blood. The lads went famished. That night, Darius packed his bag and vanished. His parents filed a missing person report, but I knew he was with his girlfriend's family in Nevada. One less ally, yet I was relieved he had escaped. The younger relative's transition has hastened. They created practice groups and met after school to improve their techniques. Silas, 10, boasted about the skills his grandfather had shown him privately. The custom was evolving, becoming self-sufficient even without the elder generation's enforcement. These boys would continue their violence. My mother's weight decrease was tough to ignore. She had given her parts to my sister so frequently that her garments hung loosely about her frame. When I approached her, she just responded, "2 more weeks, then you're free, and things will get easier." But we both knew grandfather would not let things get easier. Miguel's covert recordings proliferated. The 8-year-old had become our most precious asset, yet his age rendered him invisible to the adults. He showed me footage of grandfather teaching the older boys about psychological warfare and how to shatter an opponent's spirit before the combat even started. However, every video featured other cousins' faces, implicating them in the system. Grandfather planned a family reunion for the week before my birthday. Cousins from other states would attend, including those who had grown out of the fighting years before. The underlying goal was clear: to gather witnesses for my last humiliation. He wanted everyone in the family to see me broken. I tried one more time with the authorities, a different police station, a different detective. Detective Williams, a woman with lovely eyes, listened to the entire narrative. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and appeared to believe me. Then she called to verify my background and found Dr. Adler's reports. The interview concluded with pamphlets outlining mental health services. Jasper devised a fresh tactic. During confrontations, he'd position himself to unintentionally intervene when things got out of hand. A stumbled step here, a knocked-over water bottle there, minor disturbances that prevented catastrophic damage. Grandfather noticed but could not show intentionality. Calvin started making final plans for my birthday 3 weeks before it. I observed him in the garage performing combos with the heavy bag grandfather had installed. His technique was perfect, brutal. The terrified 10-year-old I had previously fought had been replaced with a true believer. He caught my eye once and merely nodded, as if an executioner was acknowledging his condemned. My father's savings plan encountered a roadblock. Grandfather, now wary of everyone, tightened his grip on the family's finances. The bank statements arrived first at his place. Any unexpected withdrawals were questioned. My father managed to hide $300 in cash, which was insufficient for an escape. The family reunion arrived, bringing cousins I hadn't seen in years. Men in their 20s and 30s, with ancient wounds from fighting. They swapped anecdotes from their glory years, comparing methods, and laughed about hunger. None of them spoke out against the tradition. They had been broken and reconstructed in grandfather's image. Grandfather staged a spectacle by announcing my birthday fight in front of 40 relatives. He proclaimed that it would take place at sunset, when warriors prove themselves. Calvin stood behind him, already dressed for battle. The message was clear. It was no longer only about tradition. The goal was to thoroughly suppress rebellion. That night I met with Jasper and a few relatives who were still privately resisting. We had evidence, but there was no way to use it without jeopardizing our family's financial stability. Miguel's movies, Darius's photographs, and my documentation are all ineffective against grandfather's economic stranglehold. We were caught between justice and survival. My 18th birthday began dark and humid. Extended family flooded the house, their joy evident. Uncles who had moved away returned to see the spectacle. Cousins filmed everything on their phones, establishing their own record of tradition's continuation. The garage was adorned with banners stating "Strength through struggle" and "Brotherhood bonds." Someone had repainted the chalk circle to accommodate the anticipated violence. The audience sat in folding seats around the walls. It wasn't just a quarrel. It was a ceremony. Calvin warmed up in the corner, his concentration unwavering. Grandfather had given him new gloves, lighter ones that sliced more easily. Every aspect had been designed to maximize damage. Uncle Tony tested the garage door to ensure it would lock correctly. There are no escapes this time. I checked our evidence cache in the abandoned building one last time. Everything remained buried, waiting until someday. Perhaps when the younger cousins became older, grandfather's grasp relaxed. Perhaps it would rot there forever as a memorial to failed resistance. As the sun began to drop, the extended family gathered. Mothers clutched their smaller children close, murmuring explanations about family tradition. The men formed their traditional circle, but this time 3 rows deep. Grandfather sat in a special chair elevated above the crowd. His glass eye caught the overhead light as he smiled. "Tonight we will remind everyone what happens to those who challenge their family," Grandfather said. His voice conveyed full power. "Calvin has trained hard. He understands honor. He will teach a necessary lesson." They shut the garage door from inside. Nobody would leave until blood struck the concrete. I stood in the circle bearing the weight of 40 relatives' expectations. Calvin entered from the opposite side, muscles clenched, ready to sever what remained of our childhood bond. The fight started without formality. Calvin attacked instantly, using combinations that grandfather had drilled into him for weeks. I avoided, obstructed, and refused to engage. The crowd became restless. Someone called for blood. Others urged action. Calvin's fury grew with each missed strike. He prepared for conflict, but discovered only evasion. His attacks became wilder and more desperate. Grandfather's training did not account for an opponent who refused to fight back. The precise choreography devolved into pandemonium. Then Jasper acted. During a particularly aggressive rush by Calvin, Jasper accidentally knocked over the water table. The collision momentarily distracted everyone. Calvin stumbled on the wet concrete, landing hard. His elbow cracked on impact and blood flowed freely. The garage erupted with confusion. Technically, blood had impacted the concrete, but it was from a fall rather than a strike. Grandfather stood, face crimson with fury. But the rules remained the rules. The combat was over. Calvin collapsed on the concrete, staring at his wounded elbow in astonishment. I helped him up, whispering an apology that he did not recognize. The audience dispersed uncertainty and lost its show. Grandfather's immaculate ceremony had crumbled into farce. At dinner, I ate while Calvin sat with an empty plate and a bandaged arm. The irony was not lost on anybody. Grandfather's chosen warrior is vanquished by clumsiness. The meal proceeded in uncomfortable quiet. Tradition is fulfilled yet somehow broken. That night, Grandfather called me into his study. He sat behind his desk, gazing at each of his 78 years. For the first time, he shook his hands without anxiety of hiding it. You won without winning, he concluded. Get out. Take nothing. Never come back.